IBM just announced the world's smallest microchip, and everyone is talking about this transistor with features only 15 atoms wide. But the most important part of this announcement isn't the transistor, it is this. As a chip design engineer, I think this tiny line can change the future of chip manufacturing. More than UV lithography or shrinking transistors ever did. Subscribe to the channel and let me explain. For the last 60 years, we've built faster chips the same way. We made transistors smaller. We went all the way from 90 nanometers 2 decades ago to today's 2 nanometer glass technology. But right now, we are running out of room. And for the first time in decades, the way we build chips is starting to change. And IBM may have just shown us the first glimpse of that future. Look at this image. It was taken with one of the world's most powerful electron microscopes. At first, it looks like a single 0.7 nanometer transistor. But if you look closer, it isn't. It's two, one on top and one underneath. And here is the crazy part. The channels where electricity actually flows are only about 15 silicon atoms wide. You would think that is the hardest part, but it isn't. The thin white line is the real breakthrough, because these two transistors were never manufactured together. In fact, they started life on two completely separate silicon wafers. Just think about what that means. One wafer takes a month to manufacture, but IBM built two of them and then bet everything on lining them up afterwards. That sounds almost impossible, and that's because it almost is. Which made me wonder, why would anyone do something like this? The answer actually begins with something I saw a few months earlier at IMEC, one of the world's leading semiconductor research labs. It's where companies like TSMC, Intel and Samsung and ASML explore technologies decades before they reach your phone or laptop. There, I saw technology the public was never supposed to see. This is a transistor that could power your devices sometime around the next decade. It's one transistor built directly above another, and its channel is only 30 atoms thick. Right there, I could literally see individual silicon atoms inside a working transistor. At first, I thought the invention was the transistor. But IBM made me realize that the real challenge is how to build it. And that's where the most interesting part of this story begins. Imagine you spent 10 years designing the next generation of transistors, and one day it finally works. Well, now you need to build the second one, right above it. That sounds super simple, until you realize what that actually means. But to build the upper transistor, the wafer has to go all over again through hundreds more manufacturing steps. Then the whole wafer is heated again, sometimes to over 1000 degrees Celsius. And every time that happens, the finished transistor has to sit through another round of extreme heat. Atoms move, materials react, tiny changes, but with huge consequences. Building the second transistor can quietly ruin the first one. Just imagine finishing a skyscraper and then discovering that adding just one more floor could collapse the entire building. And that's the trap, because the smaller and more sophisticated the transistor becomes, the less punishment it can tolerate. So IBM stopped fighting the heat, and instead they thought, what if the two transistors never had to go through manufacturing together? That sounds obvious now, but it wasn't. Instead of building both transistors on the same wafer, IBM split the job into two. One wafer carries the lower transistor, a completely separate wafer carries the upper one. Each now can be manufactured independently. Only after both are finished, engineers try to fuse them into a single one. It sounds elegant, but actually making it work took decades. And here is the crazy part. No one's screwing these two wafers together. They just stick together. But why? Because when two atomically smooth surfaces get close enough, their atoms begin attracting each other through tiny forces called van der Waals forces. One atom barely pulls at all, but across trillions of atoms touching at the same time, those tiny forces become strong enough to hold an entire wafer together. It's almost as two silicon wafers want to become one. But if we heat it, new chemical bonds form. The atoms rearrange and two separate wafers become one device. That is the basic idea behind the wafer bonding. Simple enough to explain, but crazy complicated to manufacture. Fortunately, not everything is so complicated to build. Recently, I've been using Make to build AI agents to automate parts of my workflow. One of the biggest challenges in my work is staying on the top of the latest research in AI in semiconductors. Every day, I would read dozens of research papers, newsletters, and industry sources just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So I built an AI research agent with Make. It reads the same sources I normally follow, finds the most interesting ones, summarizes them, and then sends me a daily email. What used to take hours every day now happens automatically. One feature I like particularly is the reasoning panel. It shows me how AI reached its conclusions and which sources it used. And I don't use sources I can't verify, and I expect the same from my AI workflows. On Make, I've also built a stock market watchdog that monitors the stocks, ETFs, and other assets I'm interested in, and it only alerts me when there is a significant move, then automatically cross-checks the news to explain what caused it. In this way, I can constantly stay informed without checking the markets myself. And that is just scratching the surface. You can build an AI customer support agent or an automated sales assistant, or pretty much any AI agent or workflow you can imagine. Make also offers Make great feature, the visual scenario builder and different action modules, Notion for research digests, Q&A briefs and content tracking, Gmail for partnership threads, Discord or Slack for internal notifications. I use Make because it makes building these agents easy. It has a visual interface, connects with over 3,000 apps, and lets you automate almost anything in just a few clicks. If you would like to build your own AI workflows, you can get 1 month's Pro plan for free with 10,000 operations included, no credit card required, through the link in the description box below. At this point, I thought the physics was the hardest part, but I was wrong. The biggest enemy wasn't heat, it wasn't alignment. It was one microscopic speck of dust, smaller than a red blood cell, yet enough to destroy an entire bond. And suddenly, everything else made sense. The insane polishing, the cleaning, the vacuum chambers, the alignment tools, every step exists for one reason: to stop one invisible particle from getting between the wafers. Because once that happens, months of engineering can be lost. And that is why chip factories are among the cleanest places humans have ever built. Then comes the next impossible task. Imagine trying to align billions of transistors without being able to see a single one. Only when every layer is perfectly aligned do the wafers finally touch. And here is the terrifying part. There isn't a second attempt. If they are wrong, the wafers are gone. And that's when I realized that the real innovation isn't the bonding, it's everything engineers had to do and the wafer had to go through before they can even touch. But somehow they made it work. For years, bonding was something engineers did after the important work was finished. But IBM turned it into part of the transistor itself. And once you understand what you're looking at, you start seeing this technology everywhere. First, inside your phone's camera. Your camera sensor isn't one chip anymore. It's actually two. One captures the light and the other processes the image. Then it is inside all AI chips, inside incredibly fast HBM high-bandwidth memory feeding today's GPUs. And it's also built by stacking layers, up to 14 layers, in fact. Then it's inside flash storage. You see, suddenly you couldn't stop seeing it. It's everywhere. In completely different products, done by completely different companies, the same hidden idea. Until now, that idea meant stacking finished chips. But IBM pushed it somewhere much harder, inside the transistor. And that's how they built what they call the world's first 0.7nm chip. The architecture is called Nanostack. At first, it sounds like another step in the nanometer race, getting us to 7 angstrom milestone. But I actually think it's the opposite, because for years we've been obsessed with making transistors smaller. 5nm glass technology, 3nm, 2nm. But here is what most people don't know. Those numbers haven't described the physical size of a transistor for years. They are, in fact, technology generation labels representing the overall capability of the process, like the performance and the drive current, rather than one particular dimension. And I know that might be frustrating. But this technology, nanostack technology, suggests that in the future we won't ask anymore how we can squeeze transistors even further, but how can we fit even more compute into the same space. And that's exactly what IBM is trying to do. If only Nanostack can be manufactured at scale, then the same chip could hold almost twice as many transistors, which means more computing without making the chip any larger. IBM projects up to 50% higher performance, 70% lower power consumption, and around 40% denser SRAM memory. That may sound less exciting, but for AI applications this is one of the biggest advantages, because AI processors and AI GPUs, they aren't like ancient Greek philosophers. They aren't spending all their day thinking. They have a commuting problem, because they spend most of their energy moving data between memory and the logic. So if we can bring that memory physically closer, and suddenly the process spends less time waiting and less energy moving information around. But we should be very careful, because this isn't the chip that's coming to your next laptop. IBM has shown that this architecture can actually work. Now comes the question that decides if Nanostack technology can make it or will stay in the lab. Can anyone manufacture billions of these transistors reliably and scale? Because in semiconductor industry, coming up with the idea has often been the easy part. Mass producing it changes the world. Which is why the companies I will be watching more closely aren't IBM, but Austrian EV Group and Tokyo Electron. Because when this technology becomes the future, their machines will be the ones making it possible. Well, now we've spent 60 years asking how small can we make the transistor. And now we're coming to the time when the biggest breakthroughs are not happening inside the transistor, but it's happening between them. Between one silicon layer and another, and eventually across entire computing stack. And if IBM is right, this tiny white line can become the next frontier in computing. If you enjoyed this video, please hype it and now watch how China is trying to rewrite the entire scaling roadmap with yet another scaling approach, or watch this video about the new semiconductor material that could replace silicon, and by the way, it's already on the official roadmaps. I think you're gonna enjoy both. Love you guys, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Ciao!